Welcome to a new episode of Alternative Indian Media. It is rather naive to analyze the current geopolitical events only in the context of current timeframe. Geopolitical events are often influenced by the past events. If we fail to acknowledge this, we won't be able to analyze the current events, and more importantly, we won't be able to foresee future ramifications. In this episode of Alternative Indian Media, we expose an Anglo-French deception and treachery that is at the heart of this ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict. It is extremely important for the government of India, its policymakers and think tanks to keep this in the perspective. This will have tremendous future ramifications. In 1907, a tripartite agreement was completed between the French, the British Empire and the Russian Empire. This agreement is known as Triple Entente. Triple Entente essentially was a geopolitical, military and strategic alliance that would set the stage for the First World War, which would start in 1914. Triple Entente formed the nucleus of Allied power comprising of France, British Empire and the Russian Empire. Later, Italy and USA too joined the Allied forces in 1915 and 1917 respectively. Axis power on the other hand comprised of Imperial Germany, Austro-Hungarian Empire and Ottoman Turk Empire. Bulgaria joined the Axis forces in 1915. Now you know that the groundwork for this kind of geopolitical mega-events start years before the commencement of the actual event. Anyway, coming back to the Triple Entente, British and the French persuaded and convinced the Russians to join the Allied forces by promising them Istanbul or Constantinople in the event of an Allied victory. However, this was a deception. Originally, Constantinople was the capital of Eastern Roman Empire or Byzantine Empire. Once it was taken over by the Ottoman Turks, its name got changed to Istanbul. During the First World War, it was Russia which took most of the pain. It suffered the highest number of deaths and casualties. Russia had to bear with a staggering loss of lives. Russia's economy suffered a huge setback. Inflation or price rise was unbearable for the common Russians. However, Russia was making good gains on ground. By 1917, Ottoman Turk Empire was collapsing to the much delight of the British and the French. Germany and Austro-Hungarian Empire was stuck in trench warfare with the Russians on Russia's western flanks. However, most importantly, Russian army was at the doorstep of Istanbul, which was previously known as Constantinople. As the Russian army was about to take Istanbul, globalists or global elites of that era would orchestrate the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia in 1917, and the Bolshevik uprising would impose communism upon Russia. Bolshevik Revolution was set in motion by the atheist Jews and crypto-Jews of Russia, Ukraine and Eastern Europe. Most of the frontline leaders of Bolshevik movement were Jews or crypto-Jews for that matter. They were funded by the Jewish and crypto-Jewish oligarchs and businessmen from Russia and Ukraine and their filthy rich globalist capitalist cousins settled in USA and Britain. Immensely rich Jewish American businessman called Jacob Schiff was one among them. He was from Frankfurt, Germany and later became a top brass at Kuhn Loeb and Company. Bolsheviks aka Communists would overthrow the Tsar of Russia Nicholas II and would slaughter his entire family. Communist Party under the leadership of Vladimir Lenin and Leon Bronstein, more popularly known as Leon Trotsky, would take Russia out of First World War right before Russian army could march into Istanbul. So, you can now understand the deception of the British and the French, which in essence is a Judeo-Christian empire. They subdued the Imperial Germany, Austro-Hungarian Empire and Ottoman Turk Empire using Russia, its manpower, its resources, its military infrastructure and then threw Russia into a gutter by subverting them using communism, which is an invention of the globalists. This is what I mean by the use and throw policy of the Judeo-Christian Western Empire. Naturally, question comes, why did Western Empire prevent Russia from taking Istanbul? Whomsoever controls Istanbul controls Bosporus. Bosporus Strait connects Black Sea with the Sea of Marmara, which then connects to Aegean Sea via Dardanelles Strait. Aegean Sea then opens into the Mediterranean Sea. Therefore, if you deny Russia's access to Bosporus Strait, you deny Russia's access to Mediterranean Sea. This nullifies Russian navy in the entire Mediterranean region. Zionists knew that they would establish the ideological state of Israel, and they thought that by limiting Russia's access to the Mediterranean, they would end up safeguarding the interests of Israel. Now you know that in 1917 itself, they had the blueprint ready for Israel. For the last 200 years, British Empire and later Anglo-American Empire have been working on the idea of Zionism, whereby they would first establish the State of Israel, and then they would establish the Judaic Empire called Pax Judaica. Once Lenin came to power, he wasted no time in giving Crimea a special autonomous status. Once the ideological State of Israel was created in the aftermath of the Second World War, Crimea was gifted to the state of Ukraine by the Communists, of course within the ambit of Soviet Union. Bolsheviks aka Communists went on to slaughter more than 60 million or 6 crore ethnic Russians, most of whom were of Slavic ethnicity as per Rudolf Rummel and Benjamin Valentino. Bolshevik leader turned communist leader Lenin would orchestrate famine in Russia in 1921 which killed 5 million Russians. Apart from that, there are many instances of genocide and mass murder. One such instance was the Great Purge orchestrated and instructed by Joseph Stalin, in which more 1 million ethnic Russians lost their lives. Subversion of Russia through communism and the creation of communist state called Soviet Russia was aimed to serve the purpose of Pax Judaica. Establishment of the ideological state of Israel was going to be the first step towards that. Naturally, question comes, how? Globalists use a political science principle called Hegelian Dialectic. Hegelian Dialectic comprises of 3 distinctive stages or phases: thesis or action or problem, antithesis or reaction, and synthesis or solution or outcome. Using this principle of Hegelian dialectic, globalists set a narrative and push through their agenda. They also use the principle of Hegelian dialectic in order to polarize the society among 2 contradictory or conflicting ideologies. These ideologies, such as left-wing or right-wing ideologies, or for that matter communism and fascism, are seemingly contradictory, but they are designed to serve the purpose of the elites. They are like the opposite sides of the same coin. Once the society gets completely polarized, they then orchestrate a conflict or clash between these 2 seemingly opposite ideologies. It is this clash or conflict that results into a synthesis, that is, a synthetic solution is obtained. Global elites or globalist oligarchs did just that prior to the Second World War. We have already seen that at the fag end of the First World War, globalists funded and orchestrated the Bolshevik Revolution and imposed communism upon Russia. Prior to the Second World War, globalists funded Adolf Hitler and his Nazi Party. Elitist ideologues propped up the idea of Aryanism, white supremacism, and racism. They would finance the Nazis and would create the massive German war machine. Second World War can be seen as a conflict among 2 contradictory ideologies, communism and fascism. From the point of view of Hegelian dialectic, these opposing ideologies would be called as thesis and antithesis. When these seemingly contradictory ideologies clash, a synthesis results, that is, a synthetic solution is obtained. Formation of the ideological state of Israel can be viewed as the synthesis or result or outcome of this conflict. All this time Zionists knew pretty well that communism and Soviet Russia would be used to serve the Pax Judaica project. When it was needed, communism was imposed upon the Russians and Soviet Russia was created. When the purpose was served, Judeo-Christian Anglo-American Western hegemony and the Zionists orchestrated the collapse of Soviet Union and communism. And Ukraine departed along with Crimea. Russia and Ukraine both agreed to operate their Black Sea naval fleet from Sebastopol. This arrangement was okay as long Viktor Yanukovych government was in power in Ukraine. But Western intelligence would orchestrate people's unrest in Ukraine in 2013, which would end in a military coup. Democratically elected Viktor Yanukovych government was overthrown, and Viktor Yanukovych had to flee. USA, Britain and Western powers would soon instate their puppet Petro Poroshenko, a filthy rich Ukrainian billionaire oligarch, as the president of Ukraine. This was a red flag for Russia and Vladimir Putin, as Russia's Black Sea-based naval fleet was in serious jeopardy. So, Vladimir Putin decided to annex Crimea in 2014, which is a major geopolitical and strategic defeat for the Judeo-Christian Anglo-American Empire in many years. Western Empire and NATO wants to regain back the initiative through another Western puppet called Volodymyr Zelensky. This ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict must be viewed from the correct perspective. Question is why government of India's think tank must be aware of this. Right before the start of the First World War, British authorities in India promised Indian leaders that they would give India the Dominion status once the war is over. Dominion status implies self-rule or self-governance. During the First World War, Indian soldiers fought in the battlefields of Europe as part British Indian Army. India suffered a staggering loss of lives. I do not want to go by the official figure. According to a report sent to the London-based Commonwealth War Graves Commission, estimated figure of death toll could be 350,000. However, after examining various sources, we can say that the death toll of the Indian soldiers could be as high as 2.5 million to 3 million, that is somewhere between 25 to 30 lakhs. These men died while fighting against the Imperial Germany and Austro-Hungarian Empire in the battlefields across Europe. Not only that, India's vast resources were exploited by the British. Food grains, iron ores, coal, wood and other minerals were plundered from India to support British war efforts in Europe. That is, British exploited India's vast resources and manpower in order to win First World War in Europe. However, after the war, British didn't keep up the promise. That is, the deceitful British Empire deceived the Indians. They declined to give India the Dominion status, which saw a boost in the India's freedom movement following the First World War. This influenced Pandit Nehru's and Congress-led government's foreign policy to a great extent. Nehru-ji took a leading role in the non-aligned movement. And now that the war cloud is looming large on the horizon, they are trying the same thing again. They might try to lure India by offering a permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council after the Third World War, if it unfolds, with a promise from India that India would be with West. They might also lure Narendra Modi with the prospect of a Nobel Peace Prize. That would be a disaster for India. Thanks for watching this episode. Kindly share this episode and subscribe to this channel.